The pregnancy test trembled in Dami's hands as she stood in the marble bathroom of Seoul's most dangerous man. Two pink lines stared back at her like an accusation. Behind the frosted glass door, she could hear Park Seo-jun's voice, cold and lethal, speaking to someone on the phone in rapid Korean. I don't care what it costs. Find him. Bring him to me. Alive. 12 hours. That's all it had taken for her entire world to shatter and rebuild itself into something she didn't recognize. Dami's reflection in the mirror showed a woman she barely knew, eyes wide with fear and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Her hand moved to her still flat stomach, and she wondered how a single night could change everything. But to understand how she got here, standing in a mafia boss's penthouse holding the weight of an impossible choice, you had to go back. Back to the moment her husband looked her in the eyes and destroyed their marriage with a smile on his face. Before we continue, let me ask you a question. Where in the world are you watching from? Comment below because we'd love to know how far these stories travel. Please like and subscribe because this story is about to get wild. 3 days earlier, Dami had been a different person. At 27, she'd spent 4 years building a life in Seoul that looked perfect from the outside. She worked as a translator at one of the city's most prestigious international firms, her Korean was flawless, and she was married to Minho, a handsome financial analyst she'd met at a company dinner. Their apartment in Itaewon wasn't huge, but it was theirs. Or so she'd thought. That Tuesday evening, Dami came home early. The presentation she'd been dreading had been postponed, and for once, she'd left the office before sunset. She'd stopped at the market and picked up ingredients for Minho's favorite meal, bulgogi with all the side dishes he loved. Maybe they could have a quiet dinner together. Maybe they could talk like they used to, before he started coming home later and later, before his phone became more interesting than her company. The apartment was dark when she unlocked the door, but she could see the flicker of candlelight coming from the living room. Her heart lifted slightly. Maybe he'd planned something romantic. Maybe she'd been overthinking everything. Minho, she called out, setting down the grocery bags. In here. His voice came from the living room, and there was something odd about his tone. Not quite nervous, but not quite normal either. Dami walked in to find him sitting on their couch, 2 glasses of champagne on the coffee table, still fizzing. He was dressed nicely, the blue shirt she'd bought him for his birthday, his hair styled the way he knew she liked. But he wasn't smiling. What's all this? She asked, trying to match his energy, trying to read the room. Minho gestured to the spot next to him. Sit down. We need to talk. Those 4 words. The same 4 words that had preceded every bad conversation in the history of relationships. Dami's stomach tightened, but she sat, smoothing her skirt over her knees. Is everything okay? She asked, even though she knew it wasn't. Minho picked up both glasses, handed her one. The champagne felt wrong in her hand, too festive for whatever was about to happen. I've been thinking a lot about us, he began, and Dami felt her chest constrict. About our marriage. About what we both need. Minho, let me finish. He took a breath, and Dami noticed he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. We got married young. Well, I did. And I love you, Dami. I do. But I feel like I'm missing out on experiences. On living. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Dami set down her champagne glass before she could drop it. What are you saying? I'm saying I want us to open our marriage. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been practicing them. I want us to stay together, but I want the freedom to see other people. And you could too, of course. It would be equal. For a moment, Dami couldn't process what she was hearing. The words made sense individually, but strung together like that, they felt like a foreign language. You want to sleep with other people. Her voice sounded flat, distant. I want us both to have the freedom to explore. It's not about you, Dami. You're amazing. But we're young and there's already someone else. It wasn't a question. Minho's silence was confirmation enough. Who is she? Dami heard herself ask, and she hated how small her voice sounded. Her name is Jiun. She works in my department. But nothing has happened yet, I swear. I wanted to talk to you first, to do this the right way. The right way? As if there was a right way to tell your wife you wanted permission to cheat. Dami stood up abruptly, the room spinning slightly. How long have you been thinking about this? A few months. He finally looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like pity. I thought you'd understand. You're always talking about being open-minded, about adapting to different cultures. This is modern thinking, Dami. Lots of couples. Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't you dare make this about me not being modern enough or Korean enough or whatever excuse you've convinced yourself justifies this. Minho stood too, reaching for her arm. I'm trying to be honest with you. I could have just what? Cheated behind my back. Dami pulled her arm away, anger finally cutting through the shock. Is that what you were about to say? That I should be grateful you're asking permission instead of just doing it? Comment below. Have you ever had someone try to make their betrayal sound like they're doing you a favor? Share your story. Minho's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. This doesn't have to be a big deal. Plenty of couples have arrangements. We don't have an arrangement. We have a marriage. Or I thought we did. Dami's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them against her sides. When did you stop loving me? I never stopped loving you. But even as he said it, the words sounded hollow. Rehearsed. This isn't about love. It's about freedom. About not being tied down to one person for the rest of our lives when we're still so young. Then why did you marry me? The question burst out of her, raw and painful. Why did you stand in front of everyone we know and promise to be faithful? Why did you bring me to this country? Help me build a life here. Introduce me to your family. If you were just going to. Things change, Dammy. People change. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. She stared at him, really looked at him, and realized he was right. He wasn't the same person. Or maybe he'd always been this person, and she'd been too in love to see it. You want an open marriage. Her voice was steady now cold. Fine. The door swings both ways, right? That's what you said. Equal. Something flickered across Minho's face. Surprise. Maybe even concern. Well, yes, but I didn't think you'd actually. You didn't think I'd actually what? Want the same freedom you're demanding. Dammy grabbed her purse from the chair where she'd dropped it. You want it honest? Here's honest. Our marriage is over. Not open. Over. But since you already have June lined up, I guess you'll be just fine. Dammy, wait. Minho reached for her again, but she was already moving toward the door. Don't touch me. Don't call me. Don't pretend you didn't know exactly what you were doing when you set up this little champagne moment. She could feel tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I hope she's worth it. Dammy walked out of the apartment, out of the building, into the Seoul night without a destination in mind. The late October air was cold against her skin, and she realized she'd left without her jacket. She didn't care. The cold felt appropriate. The cold felt like what her life had become in the space of 20 minutes. She walked without thinking, her feet carrying her through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Couples passed her, laughing and holding hands, and each one felt like a knife twisting deeper. Had any of them been a lie too? Had she been walking around Seoul for 4 years being pitted by everyone who saw them together? The naive foreign girl who didn't know her husband was already planning his exit? Her phone buzzed in her purse. Once, twice, 3 times. She didn't need to look to know it was Minho, probably trying to smooth things over, to convince her that his betrayal was actually something progressive and mature that she was too emotional to understand. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down her face as she walked faster, trying to outpace the humiliation and the grief and the rage all tangled together in her chest. She found herself in Gangnam without quite knowing how she'd gotten there. The neighborhood was alive with light and noise, expensive cars, designer stores, people who looked like they'd never had their hearts broken in their lives. The contrast between their glittering world and her internal devastation felt almost absurd. There was a bar on the corner, all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place that looked expensive and exclusive, the kind of place she'd normally never walk into alone. But tonight wasn't a normal night. Tonight, the entire foundation of her life had cracked open, and she needed something to stop the spiral in her mind. The doorman looked her over, her tear-stained face, her wrinkled work clothes, no jacket in the cold, and something in his expression softened. He opened the door without a word. Inside, the bar was dimly lit and half empty, the kind of quiet that felt intentional. A piano played softly in the background, some jazz standard she didn't recognize. The bartender looked up as she approached, and Dammy realized she must look worse than she thought because he immediately pulled out a stool for her. Rough night? He asked in English, clearly pegging her as a foreigner despite her fluent Korean. You could say that. Dammy's voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat. Whiskey. Whatever's good. Make it a double. The bartender nodded, pulled down a bottle from the top shelf, poured generously. He set the glass in front of her with a small bowl of nuts. This one's on the house. You look like you need it. Dammy wrapped her hands around the glass, staring into the amber liquid like it held answers. My husband just asked me for an open marriage. She didn't know why she was telling this stranger. Maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because the weight of it was too heavy to carry alone, even for another second. Ouch. The bartender winced. Let me guess. There's already someone else. June from his office. Dammy took a drink, felt the burn all the way down. He set up champagne and everything. Like he was proposing. Except he was proposing we destroy our marriage. Men are idiots. The bartender leaned against the bar. Present company included. Despite everything, Dammy almost smiled. You're not wrong. For what it's worth, any man who'd want an open marriage when he's married to someone like you is definitely an idiot. You don't even know me. I know you're sitting in one of Seoul's most exclusive bars, crying over a man who doesn't deserve you, and you still said please when you ordered. That tells me enough. Dammy looked around, really seeing the space for the first time. He wasn't wrong about exclusive. The bottles behind the bar were all top shelf, the furniture was clearly expensive, and the few other patrons were dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. How exclusive are we talking? What would you do if your partner asked for an open marriage? Comment your honest reaction. We're reading every single one. The bartender's smile turned slightly mysterious. Let's just say the owner has very particular taste in clientele. But you look like you needed a safe place, so I figured he wouldn't mind. Before Dammy could ask what that meant, she felt a presence beside her. Not threatening, but but commanding, the kind of presence that made the air shift. Jinwoo. The voice was deep, smooth, speaking Korean with an accent that suggested education abroad. I'll take it from here. Dammy turned and found herself looking at the most beautiful man she'd ever seen in person. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with sharp features that could have been carved from marble. His black hair was styled perfectly. His suit probably cost more than her monthly salary, and his eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The bartender, Jinwoo apparently, straightened immediately. Yes, sir. I was just. You did well. The man's eyes never left Dammy's face. Take a break. Jinwoo disappeared so quickly it was almost comical, and suddenly Dammy was alone with this stranger who commanded bartenders with 2 words and looked at her like he could see straight through to her broken heart. I'm sorry, Dammy said, starting to stand. If I'm not supposed to be here, I can leave. Sit. It wasn't harsh, but it wasn't a request either. The man slid onto the stool Jinwoo had vacated, close enough that Dammy could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. That's a very expensive whiskey to waste with crying. Dammy touched her face, realized tears were still sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them away roughly. Then I'm crying in style. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. I'm Seo-jun. Dammy. She didn't know why she gave him her name. Didn't know why she wasn't leaving. But something about him made her want to stay, made the chaos in her head quiet down just slightly. Dammy. He said it carefully, like he was tasting the syllables. Not Korean. Nigerian. Well, Nigerian-American. Well, Korean by marriage. Except my marriage just exploded, so maybe I'm back to just Nigerian-American. She was rambling now, the whiskey and emotion making her tongue loose. Sorry, you don't need my life story. I disagree. Seo-jun gestured to Jinwoo, who'd been hovering nearby. 2 fingers raised, and Jinwoo immediately poured 2 more whiskeys. Tell me about the marriage that just exploded. And maybe it was the alcohol, or the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world, or the fact that her life had already fallen apart so spectacularly that nothing else mattered. But Dammy told him everything. She told him about meeting Minho at a company dinner 4 years ago, how charming he'd been, how he'd pursued her with flowers and thoughtful messages and promises of forever. She told him about the wedding, small but beautiful, and how his family had been kind even though she knew they'd hoped he'd marry Korean. She told him about building a life in Seoul, learning the language, trying to fit into a culture that wasn't hers but that she'd chosen anyway. And then she told him about the champagne and June and the way Minho had looked at her like she was being unreasonable for not wanting to share her husband. Seo-jun listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finally finished, her throat raw and her second whiskey gone, he was quiet for a long moment. Your husband is a fool, he said finally. And a coward. You don't have to. I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. Seo-jun leaned closer, and Dammy caught herself holding her breath. A man who has something precious and throws it away because he's bored? That's not a man. That's a child. Maybe I'm boring. The words came out small. Maybe I wasn't enough. Stop. The word was sharp enough that Dammy's eyes snapped to his. Don't do that. Don't make his weakness about you. You don't even know me. I know you're sitting here crying over someone who didn't deserve you in the first place. I know you're beautiful and clearly intelligent, and you said please to Jinwoo even though you were falling apart. I know enough. Dammy's heart was beating too fast. Who are you really, Seo-jun? His smile was dangerous. Does it matter? It might. Tonight, I'm just a man who thinks you're magnificent and your husband is an idiot. He stood, held out his hand. Come with me. Where? Away from here. Away from thoughts of champagne proposals and men named Minho. Let me show you what you deserve. Every rational part of Dammy's brain screamed that this was insane. She didn't know this man. She'd been married for 3 years and faithful for every second of it. She'd never even considered being with anyone else. But Minho had already blown up their marriage. Minho had already chosen Jiyeon. And something about the way Seo-jun looked at her made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. She took off her wedding ring, set it on the bar next to her empty glass. The gold band caught the light, a small circle that represented 3 years and infinite promises that turned out to be lies. Show me, she said, placing her hand in his. Seo-jun's fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and led her through the bar toward a private exit. As they passed, Dammy noticed the other patrons watching, not with judgment, but with something that looked almost like fear. Or respect. She couldn't tell which. They emerged into a private garage where a sleek black car waited, a driver already standing by the open door. Seo-jun helped her in, slid in beside her, and suddenly they were moving through Seoul's nighttime streets, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. Where are we going? Dammy asked, but she wasn't scared. She should have been scared. Instead, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump, and for once in her carefully planned life, she didn't care where she landed. My place. Seo-jun's hand was still holding hers. Unless you want me to take you home. Home. The apartment she'd shared with Minho, where his clothes still hung in the closet next to hers, where Jiun's name now lived like a ghost in every room. I don't have a home anymore, Dami said quietly. Drop a like if you've ever felt like your whole life changed in a single moment. Hit that subscribe and keep watching. This night is about to change everything. Seo Jun's thumb traced circles on her palm. Then stay with me tonight. The car pulled up to a building in the heart of Gangnam that looked like it cost more than most people made in a lifetime. All glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like it was trying to touch the stars. The driver opened the door, and Seo Jun led her through a private entrance, past security who bowed deeply as they passed, into an elevator that required a keycard to operate. You live in a penthouse, Dami said as the numbers climbed. 40th floor, 41st, 42nd. I do. And you own a bar. I own several businesses. The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment, and Dami stepped out into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased souls spread out below them like a sea of lights. The furniture was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and dark wood. Art hung on the walls. Real art, the kind you saw in museums, not prints from furniture stores. Who are you really? Dami asked again, turning to face him. Seo Jun shrugged off his jacket, draped it over a chair. Do you really want to know? Or do you want to keep pretending, just for tonight, that we're two people with no history, no complications, just this moment? He was giving her an out, a chance to stay in the fantasy. And Dami realized she wanted that, needed it. Tomorrow she could face reality. Tomorrow she could deal with divorce lawyers and dividing furniture and explaining to her friends that her marriage had imploded. But tonight, just tonight, she whispered. Seo Jun crossed the space between them in 3 strides. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're sure? I haven't been sure of anything in months. But this, she placed her hand over his. This feels right. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like kissing Minho. There was hunger in it, yes, but also something gentle. Something that felt like he was trying to put her broken pieces back together with his mouth. Dami kissed him back, let herself fall into it, let herself forget everything except the taste of whiskey and the feeling of his hands in her hair. They moved through the penthouse in a blur of shed clothing and heated touches. Seo Jun's bedroom was as minimalist as the rest of the space. A huge bed, more windows, the city lights providing the only illumination. He laid her down on sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent and looked at her like she was something precious. You're beautiful, he said, and the way he said it made her believe it. Made her forget that just hours ago, Minho had essentially told her she wasn't enough. So are you. Dami reached up, pulled him down to her. Now stop talking. What happened next was intense and passionate, and everything her marriage had stopped being years ago. Seo Jun touched her like he was memorizing every inch of her skin. He kissed her like he was trying to erase every hurt Minho had ever caused. And when they finally came together, Dami felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but opening. Like she'd been holding her breath for 3 years and could finally exhale. Afterward, they lay tangled in his expensive sheets, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. Seo Jun's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Tell me something true, he said quietly. Something you've never told anyone. Dami was silent for a moment, considering. I've been lonely for 2 years. Maybe longer. Minho and I, we stopped being a team somewhere along the way. We were just 2 people living in the same space, going through motions. I think I knew it was over long before tonight. I was just too scared to admit it. Why scared? Because admitting it meant I'd wasted years of my life. Meant I'd moved to a foreign country for someone who didn't love me enough. Meant I'd failed. She turned to look at him. Your turn. Tell me something true. Seo Jun's expression was unreadable in the dim light. I've never brought anyone here before. To this apartment. It's my private space, and I don't share it with anyone. Why me? Because when I saw you crying in my bar, something in me broke open. I don't know why. I don't believe in love at first sight or fate, or any of that romantic nonsense. But I saw you, and I knew I had to know you. Had to. He stopped, shook his head. I sound insane. No. Dami pressed her hand to his chest, felt his heart beating steady and strong. You sound honest. They talked through the night, sharing stories and secrets and pieces of themselves. Seo Jun told her about growing up in Seoul, about his family, about building his business empire. He was careful with details, never quite explaining exactly what his businesses were, but Dami didn't press. Tonight was about the fantasy, remember? She told him about growing up between Nigeria and America, never quite fitting in either place. About discovering she had a gift for languages and deciding to use it to see the world. About falling in love with Seoul despite its difficulty, despite the stares, despite never quite belonging. You belong, Seo Jun said firmly. Anyone who makes you feel otherwise is a fool. As dawn started to paint the sky pink, Dami found herself curled against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he could protect her from everything that waited outside this room. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt like maybe, just maybe, Minho blowing up their marriage was the best thing that could have happened to her. I should go, she whispered. even though she didn't want to. Stay. Seo Jun's arms tightened. Just a little longer. But Dammy could feel reality creeping back in with the sunrise. This had been one perfect night, an escape from the wreckage of her life. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Men like Seo Jun didn't fall for women like her. This was just, what had he called it? A moment outside of time. I can't. She sat up, started gathering her scattered clothes. It was amazing. You were amazing. But we both know this was just tonight. Have you ever had a perfect moment you knew couldn't last? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is far from over. Seo Jun sat up, watching her dress with an expression she couldn't read. It doesn't have to be just tonight. Yes, it does. Dammy pulled on her wrinkled work clothes, feeling the magic of the night evaporate with each button she fastened. You live in a penthouse in Gangnam. I'm a translator going through a divorce. We're from different worlds. What if I don't care about that? Dammy turned to look at him, still shirtless in the bed, his hair messy from her fingers, and her heart ached. You will. Eventually. Better to end it now while it's still perfect. She didn't give him a chance to argue, didn't leave her number, or ask for his. She just grabbed her purse and walked out of the bedroom, through the penthouse, into the elevator. It wasn't until the doors closed and she was descending back to street level that she let herself cry. The taxi ride back to Itaewon felt like a funeral procession. Dammy watched Seoul wake up around her, street vendors setting up, people heading to early shifts, the city stretching and yawning into a new day. A day where her marriage was over and she'd slept with a stranger and nothing would ever be the same. When she got to the apartment, Minho's car wasn't in its spot. Part of her was relieved. Part of her was furious that he'd probably spent the night with June while Dammy had been. No, she wouldn't feel guilty. She had nothing to feel guilty about. Inside, the apartment looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. The champagne glasses were still on the coffee table, a reminder of how her life had shattered. Dammy picked them up, walked to the kitchen, and threw them against the wall. The sound of breaking glass was satisfying in a way that scared her. She cleaned it up mechanically, then stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling of Seo Jun's hands on her skin, the taste of his mouth, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious. It had been a fantasy, a beautiful, necessary fantasy, but it was over now. By the time Minho came home that afternoon, Dammy had already called a lawyer and found a hotel room she could afford for a few weeks while she figured out her next move. Dammy, we need to talk. Minho started, but she cut him off. I want a divorce. I've already contacted a lawyer. You can keep the apartment, the furniture, all of it. I just want out. Minho's face went pale. You can't be serious. Last night you were just upset. Last night you destroyed our marriage. I'm just accepting reality. Dammy zipped up her suitcase, filled with enough clothes to last her a few weeks. My lawyer will be in touch about the paperwork. Dammy, please. We can work this out. I was wrong to bring it up like that. We can try counseling. You don't get it. She turned to face him, and the look on her face must have been devastating because he actually stepped back. I don't love you anymore. Maybe I haven't for a long time. You just gave me permission to admit it. Is there someone else? The question came out sharp, accusatory. Dammy thought about Seo Jun, about the way he'd held her like she was breakable and precious. That's not your business anymore. She walked out with her suitcase and didn't look back. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork and lawyers and concerned messages from friends that Dammy mostly ignored. She threw herself into work, taking on extra projects, anything to keep her mind occupied. At night, alone in her sterile hotel room, she tried not to think about a penthouse overlooking Seoul and a man whose full name she didn't even know. 7 days after the night that changed everything, Dammy woke up feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, but off. Her body felt different in a way she couldn't explain. She ignored it, got ready for work, made it through 2 meetings before she had to excuse herself to throw up in the office bathroom. Food poisoning, she told herself. Bad kimchi from the convenience store. But when it happened again the next day, and the day after that, a cold dread started settling in her stomach. No, it wasn't possible. They'd been careful, mostly careful, hadn't they? On day 10, 12 days after her husband had asked for an open marriage, 12 days after her world had exploded, Dammy stood in a pharmacy in a neighborhood where no one knew her and bought a pregnancy test with shaking hands. The hotel bathroom had terrible lighting, but those 2 pink lines were unmistakable. Dammy sank to the floor, her back against the bathtub, and stared at the test like it might change if she looked at it long enough. Pregnant. She was pregnant with a stranger's baby. A stranger whose last name she didn't know, whose number she didn't have, who lived in a world so far removed from hers that they might as well be on different planets. Oh God, she whispered to the empty bathroom. What have I done? Her phone buzzed. Minho again, his 5th message that day begging her to reconsider, to give him another chance, insisting he'd made a mistake and they could fix this. Dammy looked at the pregnancy test, then at her phone, and started laughing. It was the kind of laugh that bordered on hysteria, the kind that might turn into crying if she let it. Her husband wanted her back. She was pregnant with another man's child, and she had absolutely no idea how to find that man to tell him. She tried to remember details from that night. The bar had been called Eclipse. She remembered seeing it on a napkin. It was in Gangnam, somewhere near the high-end shopping district. That was a start, wasn't it? The next evening, after work, Dammy found herself standing outside Eclipse. In daylight, it looked even more intimidating. All dark glass and understated elegance, the kind of place where you needed to know someone to get in. She pushed through the door anyway. The same doorman from that night looked her over, and she saw recognition flicker in his eyes. Mississippi, I'm sorry, but we're not open yet. I need to find someone. A man named Seo Jun. He was here about 2 weeks ago. Please. Dammy heard the desperation in her voice and didn't care. It's important. The doorman's expression went carefully blank. I don't know anyone by that name. Please. I know he was here. I was with him. I need to talk to him. What would you do in Dammy's situation? Comment below and hit subscribe. This is about to get even more complicated. Miss, I really can't help you. The doorman's voice was firm but not unkind. I suggest you go home. Dammy wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. But she could see in his eyes that pushing would get her nowhere. She left, her throat tight with frustration and fear. She tried searching online. Park Seo-jun. It was a common enough name that hundreds of results came up. Actors, businessmen, students. None of them matched the man from that night. She scrolled through images until her eyes burned, but he wasn't there. By the end of the second week, Dammy was starting to panic. She was definitely pregnant. Another test confirmed it, and then another. The morning sickness was getting worse. She'd have to tell someone eventually. Make decisions. But how could she make any decisions when she couldn't even find the father? She returned to Eclipse 3 more times. Each time, the doorman turned her away more firmly. On her 4th attempt, the bartender, Jin Woo, came out. You need to stop coming here, he said quietly, glancing around like he was worried someone might see them talking. It's not safe for you. Not safe? What does that mean? Dammy grabbed his arm. Please. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just need to talk to him. Jin Woo's expression was pained. Even if I wanted to help you, which I do, you seem like a nice person. I value my life too much. The man you're looking for isn't someone you track down. If he wants to see you again, he'll find you. That's how it works. What if he can't find me? What if, Dammy's voice cracked. What if I need to tell him something important? Jin Woo studied her face, and she saw the moment understanding dawned. His eyes went wide, then filled with something like sympathy and fear. Oh no, he breathed. Please, Dammy whispered. Jin Woo shook his head slowly. I can't. I'm sorry. I really am. But getting involved in his business is a death sentence for people like me. He stepped back toward the door. My advice. Disappear. Leave Seoul if you can. Forget you ever met him. The door closed between them, and Dammy stood on the street feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse overlooking Gangnam, Park Seo-jun was going insane. For 2 weeks, he'd had his entire organization searching for one woman. One beautiful, broken-hearted woman who'd walked out of his life at dawn and taken something vital with her. He'd given his men her first name, her description, told them to search every translation firm in Seoul. But Dammy was apparently more common than he'd thought, and without a last name, they were chasing ghosts. Boss, we've checked 15 companies. His second-in-command, Taeyong, stood in front of his desk looking exhausted. We found 4 damas. None of them matched the description. Then checked 20 companies. 30. All of them. Seo-jun's voice was cold, controlled, but inside he was falling apart. I don't care how long it takes. Sir, with respect, Taeyong hesitated. We have other matters that need your attention. The Park faction is making moves in Gangnam East. The shipment from Busan needs approval. And there's the issue with the finance manager at JK Financial who's been skimming from our clubs. Seo-jun waved his hand dismissively. Handle the Parks. Approve the shipment. And bring me the finance manager. I'll deal with him personally. His name is Kim Min-ho. Should I? I don't care what his name is. Bring him to me tomorrow. Seo-jun turned back to the windows. Seoul spread out below him like a map he owned, but couldn't navigate to find the one person who mattered. And double the men looking for Dammy. I want her found. Taeyong bowed and left, and Seo-jun was alone with his obsession. He'd never felt like this before. In his world, people came when called. Information was bought and sold. Nothing stayed hidden for long. But this woman, this infuriating, beautiful woman who'd cried in his bar and kissed him like he was oxygen and then disappeared, she'd somehow become invisible. He touched the sheets on his bed that he hadn't let anyone wash, because they still smelled faintly of her perfume. He was losing his mind. Park Seo-jun, one of the most feared men in Seoul, reduced to keeping sheets that smelled like a woman whose last name he didn't even know. The next evening, Taeyong brought Kim Min-ho to the penthouse. The man was sweating before he even stepped out of the elevator. He was young, handsome in a conventional way, dressed in an expensive suit that didn't quite fit right. The kind of man who wanted to look successful but was playing at it. Mr. Park. Min-ho's voice shook slightly. There's been a misunderstanding. I can explain. You've been stealing from my clubs. Seo-jun didn't raise his voice. He never had to. 3 million won over 6 months. Did you think I wouldn't notice? It was a loan. I was going to pay it back. I swear. You're married. Seo Jun had the file open on his desk. He'd barely glanced at it before, focused as he was on other matters. But now something made him look closer. To a woman named. He stopped, stared at the document. Read it again to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Spouse, Adedami Okoye. Goes by Dami. Nigerian national. Age, 27. Translator. What did you say? Seo Jun's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Minho, mistaking the question, stammered. I can get you the money. Just give me 2 weeks. Your wife. Seo Jun stood slowly, his eyes fixed on Minho's face. Describe her. Minho blinked, confused by the change in topic. My wife? I don't see what she has to do with. Describe. Her. Each word came out like a bullet. She's African. Beautiful. About 170 centimeters. She works as a translator at Hanson International. Minho was sweating more now, clearly trying to figure out how his wife connected to his embezzlement. But we're separated. She moved out 2 weeks ago. We're getting divorced. 2 weeks ago. Seo Jun's mind was racing. 2 weeks ago. The night she'd been crying in his bar. The night she'd told him about her husband asking for an open marriage. Drop a comment if you can feel the tension building. And make sure you're subscribed. You won't believe what happens next. Why did she leave you? Seo Jun asked, his voice deadly calm. Minho shifted uncomfortably. That's personal. I don't think. Why did she leave you? Something in Seo Jun's tone made Minho's remaining courage evaporate. I asked for an open marriage. She didn't take it well. She left that night and filed for divorce the next day. But what does this have to do with the money? Seo Jun felt something dark and satisfying settle in his chest. This was the husband. The fool who'd had Dami and thrown her away. The idiot who'd sent her crying into a bar where Seo Jun had been waiting. Where is she now? Seo Jun asked. I don't know. Some hotel in Itaewon, I think. She won't return my calls. Minho's face twisted with something between anger and regret. Look, I made a mistake with my wife, okay? But I'm trying to fix it. If you could just give me time with the money. Taeyong. Seo Jun didn't take his eyes off Minho. Get me her hotel information. Her workplace. Everything. Yes, boss. Taeyong disappeared, already pulling out his phone. Minho's eyes widened. Why do you want to know about my wife? What's she to you? Seo Jun smiled, and it was not a kind smile. That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is that you stole from me, and that kind of disrespect usually ends very badly for people. Please, Minho's voice cracked. I have connections. Important people. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. Seo Jun sat back down, already dismissing him. You're going to leave Seoul. Tonight. You're going to quit your job, break your lease, and disappear. If I ever see your face in this city again, or if you ever contact your wife again, I'll make sure you regret being born. You can't just. I can. I am. Seo Jun's eyes were ice. You wanted freedom from your marriage? Congratulations. You're free. Now get out of my city. Taeyong returned with a paper, handed it to Seo Jun. She's staying at the Metro Hotel in Itaewon. Room 412. She works at Hanson International, daytime shift. And boss, he hesitated. She's been looking for you. Seo Jun's head snapped up. What? She's been to Eclipse 4 times in the past week. Jinwoo finally told her to stop coming. Said she seemed desperate to find you. Something in Seo Jun's chest cracked open. She'd been looking for him. She hadn't just walked away and forgotten. She'd been searching, just like he had. Get him out of here. Seo Jun gestured at Minho. Make sure he's on a train out of Seoul by midnight. I don't care where he goes. As his men dragged a protesting Minho toward the elevator, Seo Jun was already grabbing his jacket. 2 weeks. She'd been looking for him for 2 weeks, and his own people had been turning her away at the door. The irony would have been funny if it didn't make him want to tear something apart. 20 minutes later, he was standing outside the Metro Hotel. It was a budget place, nothing like where she should be staying, nothing like what she deserved. The fact that she'd gone from a marriage to this because of that fool Minho made Seo Jun's jaw clench. Room 412 was on the 4th floor. Seo Jun stood outside the door for a moment, suddenly uncertain. What if she didn't want to see him? What if that night had meant something different to her than it had to him? What if? He knocked before he could overthink it further. There was silence, then footsteps. The door opened a crack, chain still attached, and then Dami's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes went wide. Seo Jun. She sounded breathless, shocked. How did you? Let me in. Please. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then the door closed. He heard the chain slide, and it opened fully. Dami stood there in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, looking more beautiful than he remembered. How did you find me? She asked as he stepped inside. The room was small, impersonal, with a single bed and a tiny bathroom visible through an open door. Your husband came to see me tonight. Well, ex-husband. Or soon-to-be. Seo Jun closed the door behind him, and suddenly the small room felt even smaller with both of them in it. He's been stealing from my businesses. When I saw your name in his file. Wait. Dami held up a hand. Minho was stealing from you? Your businesses? Her eyes searched his face. What kind of businesses, Seo Jun? Who are you really? He could lie. He could soften it. But she deserved the truth. I run most of the underground operations in Gangnam. Clubs, gambling, protection. Some less legal than others. He watched her process this. The bar where we met, Eclipse, that's mine. The building it's in is mine. A significant portion of Seoul's nightlife is mine, one way or another. You're a gangster. Her voice was flat. I prefer businessman, but yes. In your country, you'd call it mafia, I suppose. Dammy sank down onto the bed, her face pale. Oh my god. Jin Woo said I should disappear, leave Seoul. He said getting involved with you was dangerous. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. Seo Jun stayed by the door, giving her space. I'm not a good man, Dammy. I've done things that would horrify you. But I've been searching for you for 2 weeks. I've had 50 men combing this city, and you were looking for me too. That has to mean something. I was looking for you because, she stopped, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. Because I needed to tell you something. Seo Jun saw the gesture, understood it immediately. Everything in the world seemed to stop. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Dammy's eyes filled with tears. 12 days. It's been exactly 12 days since that night. Since Minho asked for the open marriage. I took 3 tests. They're all positive. Seo Jun crossed the room in 2 strides, knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees. Look at me. She did, tears spilling down her cheeks. Is it mine? He asked quietly. Yes. Minho and I. We hadn't. She wiped at her face angrily. It's yours. I know the timing seems suspicious, but I swear. I believe you. And he did. He could see the truth in her eyes, in the way her whole body was shaking. Are you keeping it? What would you do in this impossible situation? Comment below, and make sure you subscribe because this story is about to explode. I don't know. Dammy's voice broke. I don't know anything anymore. My marriage is over. I'm living in a terrible hotel room. I'm pregnant with a baby whose father is apparently a crime boss, and I have no idea what to do. Seo Jun's hands tightened on her knees. Do you want to keep it? Forget everything else. Forget me, forget Minho, forget all the complications. Do you want this baby? Dammy was quiet for a long moment, her hand still pressed to her stomach. Yes, she whispered finally. I know it's insane. I know the timing is terrible. But yes, I want this baby. Then keep it. Seo Jun's voice was firm, certain. Keep our baby. I'll take care of everything. You don't have to do that. This isn't your responsibility. It's my child. That makes it absolutely my responsibility. He reached up, cupped her face in his hands. And that night wasn't just random for me, Dammy. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I haven't slept in that bed since you left because it smelled like you, and I wasn't ready to let that go. I've had my entire organization searching for you like a madman. So don't tell me this isn't my responsibility. You don't even know me. Not really. One night doesn't. Then let me know you. Move in with me. Let me take care of you and our baby. Let me prove that I'm not just some criminal who got you pregnant and disappeared. Dammy shook her head, fresh tears falling. You live in a different world than I do. You said it yourself. You're not a good man. What kind of life is that for a child? A protected one. A safe one. Seo Jun's voice was intense. I know my world is dangerous. I know I've done terrible things. But my child will never want for anything. Will never be hurt. I'll burn this entire city down before I let anything happen to either of you. That's not normal, Seo Jun. That's not how normal people think. I'm not normal people. And you knew that when you came home with me. His thumbs brushed away her tears. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to forgive me for what I am. I'm just asking you to let me protect you. Both of you. Dammy searched his face, and Seo Jun let her see everything. The obsession, the possessiveness, the desperate need that had consumed him for 2 weeks. He wasn't a man who begged. But for her, for this, he would get on his knees and plead. What about Minho? She asked quietly. What did you do to him? I sent him away. Out of Seoul. He won't bother you again. You can't just make people disappear because they're inconvenient. I can. I do. But I didn't hurt him, if that's what you're asking. I just made it very clear that Seoul isn't his city anymore. Seo Jun's expression hardened. He's a coward and a fool, and he doesn't deserve another second of your concern. He's still my husband. Legally. Not for long. I'll have my lawyers handle the divorce. You'll be free of him within a month. Dammy laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. You're just going to take over my entire life, aren't you? If you let me. His voice softened. I know this is fast. I know it's overwhelming. But I meant what I said that night. You're magnificent. And now you're carrying my child, and that changes everything. What if I say no? What if I want to do this alone? Seo Jun's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to speak calmly. Then I'll respect that. I'll make sure you have everything you need, money, a better place to live, medical care. But I'll still be part of this child's life. I won't be an absent father. Even if being around you puts us in danger, especially because of that. The safest place in Seoul is by my side. Anyone who wanted to hurt you would have to go through me first, and no one is that stupid. Dammy closed her eyes, and Seo Jun could practically see the war happening behind them. Logic versus emotion. Safety versus independence. Fear versus something that might be hope. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. How much time? I don't know. A few days? A week? She opened her eyes, looked at him. This is my life, Seo Jun. My baby's life. I can't just jump into your world because one night was amazing and you have pretty words. He wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her they didn't have time to waste. That every moment she spent in this terrible hotel was a moment too long. But he could see the exhaustion in her face, the fear and confusion. Pushing now would only drive her away. One condition, he said. You move out of this hotel. I have an apartment building in Itaewon. Nice places, safe, secure. You stay there while you think. I'll pay the rent, and you'll have your own space. No strings attached. Seo Jun. This room isn't safe. The lock is flimsy, the neighborhood has problems, and you're pregnant with my child. I'm not asking, Dammy. On this, I'm not asking. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but I pay my own rent. I'm not a charity case. We can argue about money later. Seo Jun stood, pulled out his phone. Pack your things. I'll have Taeyong arrange the apartment tonight. Tonight? I can't just. Yes, you can. And you will. He made the call, spoke rapidly in Korean, then hung up. It'll be ready in an hour. 1 bedroom, full kitchen, security at the entrance. You'll be safe there. Dammy stood slowly, and Seo Jun noticed how tired she looked. How thin. The morning sickness had probably been bad. She'd always been slender, but now she looked almost fragile. When was the last time you ate? He asked. She frowned. This morning, I think. I've had trouble keeping food down. That's not good enough. Seo Jun was already texting his chef. Pack. I'll have food sent to the new apartment. Something light that won't upset your stomach. You're very bossy. Yes. You'll get used to it. Despite everything, Dammy smiled slightly. You're assuming I'm keeping you around. I'm assuming I'm not giving you a choice. But his voice was gentle when he said it. Pack, Dammy. Let me do this much. She nodded, moved to the small closet to gather her things. Seo Jun watched her. This woman who'd turned his world upside down in a single night, who was now carrying his child, who was still fighting him even though she was clearly exhausted and scared. Have you ever had someone try to protect you when you weren't sure you wanted protection? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Within the hour, Dammy was standing in an apartment that was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. It wasn't as extravagant as Seo Jun's penthouse, but it was beautiful. Hardwood floors, modern appliances, a bedroom with an actual view instead of a brick wall. The security guard downstairs had bowed to her like she was someone important, and that alone made her uncomfortable. Seo Jun had insisted on carrying her single suitcase up himself, had walked through every room checking locks and windows like he expected assassins to come through the walls. Now he stood in her new kitchen, unpacking containers of food his chef had prepared, rice porridge, mild soup, fruit that had been cut into perfect pieces. You need to eat, he said, arranging everything on the counter. And drink water. Lots of water. It helps with the nausea. How do you know that? Dammy asked, surprised. I called a doctor while you were packing. Asked what you'd need. He pulled out a business card, set it on the counter. Dr. Yoon. She's the best OBGYN in Seoul. I've made you an appointment for next week. She'll do a full examination, make sure everything is progressing normally. You can't just. Dammy stopped, laughed helplessly. Actually, apparently you can just do whatever you want. When it comes to you and our baby. Yes. Seo Jun's expression was serious. I know you need time to think. I'm giving you that. But I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with you struggling alone when I have the resources to help. Dammy sat down at the counter, suddenly overwhelmed by everything. The apartment, the food, the doctor's appointment, the man standing in her kitchen acting like he'd been preparing for fatherhood his whole life, when 3 hours ago, he hadn't even known she was pregnant. Why are you being so nice to me? She asked quietly. You barely know me. This baby, it was an accident. You could have just given me money and walked away. Most men would. Seo Jun was quiet for a moment, his hands braced on the counter. When he looked at her, his eyes were intense in a way that made her breath catch. That night, when you walked into my bar crying, something in me recognized something in you. I don't know how else to explain it. I've spent 32 years building walls around myself, being the man everyone fears, never letting anyone close. And then you sat down, and you were so heartbroken and so honest, and those walls just... He made a gesture like something crumbling. They didn't matter anymore. That's not how people work, Seo Jun. You can't just fall for someone in one night. I didn't say I fell for you. His voice was careful. I said something in me recognized something in you. Maybe that's the beginning of falling. Maybe it's something else. But I know that for 2 weeks, I couldn't think about anything but finding you. And now you're pregnant with my child, and every instinct I have is screaming at me to protect you both. So yes, I'm being nice to you. I'm going to keep being nice to you. And eventually, you're going to stop being surprised by it. Dammy picked at the rice porridge, found it was perfectly seasoned, exactly what her stomach could handle. What if I decide I don't want this? Us. Whatever this is. Then I'll respect your decision. Seo Jun's jaw clenched. But I'll still be part of my child's life. I'll still make sure you're both safe and cared for. You can hate me if you want. You can keep me at arm's length. But you can't keep me away entirely. I won't allow it. You can't control everything. Watch me. But there was no heat in it, just certainty. They ate in silence for a while, and Dammy found herself studying him. In his expensive suit with his perfect hair and his commands that people jumped to obey, he looked like he belonged in a completely different world. But sitting in her kitchen, making sure she ate enough, there was something almost vulnerable about him. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you rest. You think. You go to work if you want, or take some time off. I can arrange that with your company. You can't just call my company. I own the building your company leases. I can do whatever I want. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. But I won't if you don't want me to. I'm trying to respect your boundaries. Trying being the operative word. I'm not good at boundaries. Seo-jun stood, started cleaning up the dishes. But I'm trying. For you. Dammy watched him move around her kitchen like he belonged there, and something in her chest ached. This shouldn't work. A one-night stand that resulted in pregnancy with a man who ran Seoul's underworld. Nothing about this should work. But somehow, sitting here with him, she felt safer than she had in weeks. Maybe years. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of all of this. Of you. Of being a mother. Of what my life has become. Seo-jun turned to face her. I'm scared too. You? You're scared of something. Terrified. He moved closer, stood in front of where she sat. I'm scared I'll be a terrible father. I'm scared my world will hurt you, or our child. I'm scared you'll decide you're better off without me, and I'll have to live with only being part of my kid's life instead of being there for everything. I'm scared that, he stopped, swallowed hard. I'm scared that for the first time in my life, I found something I can't control and can't live without. Dammy reached out, took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, holding tight like she might disappear again. I need 3 days, she said. 3 days to think, to process, to figure out what I want. Can you give me that without showing up or sending your people to check on me, or trying to control everything? Seo-jun looked like she'd asked him to cut off his own arm. 3 days. 3 days. And then we'll talk. Really talk. About what this means, what we're doing, how this could possibly work. And you'll call me if you need anything? Anything at all. Yes. And you'll eat. And rest. And go to that doctor's appointment. Yes, Seo-jun. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and her phone buzzed. That's my private number. Not many people have it. You call me, day or night. I don't care, if you need me. Okay. He looked like he wanted to say more, to demand more, to somehow ensure she wouldn't change her mind and disappear. But instead, he just lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a promise. 3 days, he said again. But after that, Dammy, I'm not letting you push me away. Our child deserves a father. And you. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. You deserve someone who sees how magnificent you are. Then he left, and Dammy was alone in her new apartment with the lingering scent of his cologne and a future she couldn't begin to predict. The next 3 days were the longest of her life. Dammy went to work, smiled when people asked if she was feeling okay, and tried to wrap her mind around everything that had happened. At night, alone in her apartment, she thought about Seo-jun, about Minho, about the baby growing inside her that hadn't been planned but somehow felt right. What would your answer be after 3 days? Comment below, and don't forget to like this video if you're invested in Dammy's story. On the morning of the 3rd day, Dammy woke up knowing what her answer would be. It wasn't logical. It wasn't safe. But it was honest. She called Seo-jun before she could change her mind. He answered on the first ring. Dammy. Just her name. But she could hear everything in it. Relief, concern, hope. Can you come over? She asked. We need to talk. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He made it an 8. When Dammy opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his hair less perfect than usual, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But the moment he saw her, his whole face transformed. You look terrible, Dammy said. I haven't slept. I've been waiting for you to call. He stepped inside, closed the door. What did you decide? Dammy took a breath, gathered her courage. I'm terrified of your world. I'm terrified of what it means for our baby. I'm terrified that this is moving too fast, and I'm making a huge mistake. Seo-jun's expression fell, and Dammy saw real pain flicker across his face. But, she continued, I'm also tired of being alone. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel something for you when I do. And I want my baby to have a father who actually wants to be there. So yes, I'll let you be part of this. Part of our lives. The transformation was instant. Seo-jun crossed the room, pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Thank you, he breathed into her hair. Thank you. But we need rules, Dammy said, her voice muffled against his chest. I need to know what I'm getting into. I need honesty about your business, about the dangers, about everything. Anything. Whatever you need. And I'm not moving into your penthouse right away. I need time. We need to actually get to know each other before we what? Seo-jun pulled back slightly, his hands on her face. Before we become a family? Dammy, we're already becoming a family. But I understand. We'll take it at your pace. My pace might be slow. Then we'll go slow. His thumb brushed across her cheek. As long as you're safe and our baby is safe, I can be patient. The next 3 months were a strange kind of courtship. Seo Jun was true to his word. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't try to take over her life completely. But he was there. Always there. He came to every doctor's appointment, held her hand during the ultrasound when they heard their baby's heartbeat for the first time. He brought her food when the morning sickness was bad, rubbed her feet when they swelled, and read every pregnancy book he could find like he was studying for the most important test of his life. Slowly, Dami learned about his world. He was honest about the violence, about the things he'd done, about the enemies he'd made. And instead of scaring her away, his honesty made her trust him more. He wasn't trying to hide who he was. He was letting her see everything and letting her decide if she could live with it. The divorce from Minho went through without incident. Seo Jun's lawyers handled everything, and Dami signed the papers in a conference room that probably cost more per hour than she made in a week. Minho didn't contest anything. Apparently, being banished from Seoul by Park Seo Jun made a man very agreeable. At 5 months pregnant, Dami finally admitted what she'd been trying to deny. "I love you," she said one night, lying in his arms in the apartment that had become their halfway point. "I don't know when it happened, but I do." Seo Jun had gone very still. "Say that again. I love you. Even though you're bossy and controlling and you run an empire built on things I probably shouldn't ask about. I love you." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, his hand gentle on her swelling stomach. "I loved you the moment you walked into my bar. I just didn't know it yet." At 6 months, she moved into the penthouse. Not because he demanded it, but because she wanted to. Because coming home to him every night felt right in a way nothing else ever had. At 7 months, he proposed. Not with champagne. He'd learned his lesson about that, but with a simple question while they were lying in bed, his hand on her stomach feeling their daughter kick. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of the baby. Not because you need protection. But because I love you and I want to spend every day of the rest of my life proving it." "Yes," Dami answered without hesitation. "Yes." Their daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in April, 6 months after Minho had asked for an open marriage, 6 months after Dami's world had shattered and rebuilt itself into something better. She was perfect, dark skin like her mother, her father's eyes, tiny fingers that wrapped around Seo Jun's thumb and didn't let go. "She's magnificent," Seo Jun whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his daughter for the first time. Just like her mother. Dami watched the most feared man in Seoul cry over their baby girl and knew she'd made the right choice. All of it, the pain, the fear, the leap into the unknown, had led her here. To this moment. To this family. "What should we name her?" she asked. Seo Jun looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Hope. Let's call her Hope. Because that's what you gave me when you walked into my bar that night. Hope that I could be more than what I was. Hope that I deserved something beautiful in my life. Hope Park." Dami tested the name. "I like it." 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony with only close friends and Seo Jun's most trusted people. Dami wore a simple white dress, held their daughter on her hip, and promised to love the man who'd found her at her lowest and helped her build something extraordinary. Minho heard about the wedding from someone and tried to send a message. Seo Jun had his people make it very clear that communication of any kind would be unwise. They never heard from him again. Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask questions, Dami would tell her the truth. That sometimes life falls apart, so it can fall together in a better way. That 12 hours can change everything. That the right person at the right time can save you, even when you didn't know you needed saving. And she would never mention the champagne proposal or the man who'd thrown her away like she was nothing. Because that part of her life was over. Finished. A chapter that had to close so a better one could begin. Her husband, her real husband, asked for forever, and Dami gave it to him gladly. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about love, redemption, and second chances. Comment below. Do you believe in love that changes everything in an instant? Share your thoughts. We love hearing from you. And remember, sometimes the worst moment of your life is just the beginning of your best chapter. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.